Welcome back to B.HookedCrochet.com. I'm your host Brittany, and in this episode I'm going to demonstrate how to make the Russian join. This is a really cool technique that I have mixed emotions about, but it's a great way of adding on a new skein or changing colors. So to follow along with this demonstration, you're just going to need 2 cuts of yarn and a darning needle. When doing the Russian join for the first time, I recommend that you practice on a couple of scrap pieces of yarn. Here I have 2 different cuts that are about 12 inches long. That gives you plenty to work with. And I'm also going to be demonstrating on a bulky weight yarn because it's a little bit easier to see on the film. So the first thing you want to do is overlap your pieces. So I basically just make a cross. So lay one piece on the bottom, other piece directly on top, and then grab this side and fold it over. And then pull that. The next thing you want to do is thread one of those ends on your darning needle. And since I'm using a bulky weight yarn, I am using a bigger darning needle or tapestry needle. And I would recommend you use, if you're using a worsted weight yarn or a lighter weight yarn, use the smallest darning needle that you possibly can with getting the yarn threaded. And that's because we're going to be working this needle inside of the plies of the yarn. And so the smaller the darning needle, the easier it is to accomplish that. Now I have found one little trick is leaving the tail that you've pulled through, leaving that pretty short makes this go a little bit easier. And so what we want to do, I'm demonstrating with 2 different colors so you can see which ones I'm working into. So we're working on this yellow color, and I'm just going to loop it back over that blue yarn, and I want to go inside the plies. So this is a 2-ply yarn, so there's 2 strands that are wound together, and I want to work my darning needle exactly in the middle of those 2 plies. Sometimes you'll find it easier if you untwist the ply. That'll help you work your darning needle in. I have found, however, that if I leave it, then I have more success. And so you can see, if I slip out of the ply, I can see that. And so I just work it back through and just make sure that I'm staying within the plies. One thing that's really important to know when working with the Russian join is the longer you work this part, then the stronger your join is going to be. And honestly, that's where my mixed emotions come in on this technique, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a bit. Now you're going to need to bunch the yarn up on your needle, as you can see here, and just go for as long as you possibly can. I would say no less than about 2 to 3 inches is going to be good. And once you're finished, you can pull it out, and then you're just simply going to pull that through. Now this part is not always easy, but I usually, as you can see, just hold on to it with my fingers, and then you can go ahead and remove your darning needle. Now I'm going to leave it like that. We'll come back to it and finish it up. Now the important part is we have our blue yarn within this loop. We want to keep it that way. And then we'll thread the blue yarn onto our darning needle. Now I'm going to flip this the other way because I find it easier to work in this direction. I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to insert my needle into the plies, and I'm just going to work it as long as I can. And now we'll just pull it through. So just loosely hold on to it. If you're pinching, it's not going to come through. So I usually just hold my fingers on each side of the needle and then just pull it through. Okay, then we can remove that. And now we have our two shorter ends, which is where the darning needle was threaded. We want to pull the longer ends. And there we're just concealing those ends. And now basically we have these two different, in this case the two different colors or the two different pieces of yarn that are pretty much worked within each other. So we made that loop and then we worked it into the ply, and that's what secures this join. Now if you pull on it pretty hard, I mean I'm pulling pretty hard and it's not coming loose, and that's great. That is one of the things that when it works really well for this technique. The last thing you want to do is just trim off the little tails that pop through. And at this point, our join is complete. Now, the more you pull on this, the more you're going to work them out. Honestly, I have found that this is never ending. It's always going to pop out. The more you pull, the more you're going to pop out and trim off. And then you're going to end up with your join being so short that finally you pull and it's going to come apart. Now, that's where my mixed emotions come in. This is a really cool joining technique. And it's something that I've enjoyed learning. It's something that has been very challenging, so I'm going to be completely honest. It took me several tries to really get this down, and even still, it's not perfect for me. In my experience, using applied yarn like this, where we have two or more strands that are twisted together, those types of yarns are optimal for this joining technique. Now, I've used it on a roving style yarn, so like Red Heart, Boutique Unforgettable, or Treasure, Landscapes by Lion Brand. Any of those, I haven't had success in trying to get those to join without coming apart after putting some pressure on them. So just keep that in mind. Practice several times, and you're going to use this in ways where you would need to join on a new skein of yarn, or if you were changing colors. And of course we have no knots, and therefore it's supposed to be a smoother transition. So that's where you would use this technique. Just know that, you know, I'm not super sold on this joining technique. I do question its strength. So keep that in mind, give it a try. It's something cool to learn. It's a very neat technique. And let me know what you think. Feel free to leave a comment in this video or comment on the blog at BHookedCrochet.com. I'm your host, Brittany, and we'll see you in the next episode at BHookedCrochet.com.